Hi everyone, this is Dana Jelkinen, Deputy Director of Museum and Education here at the Ohio Statehouse, and we are back once again for another Stories in the Stateroom. So welcome back to the Stateroom, and very happy to see you here today. Today we're going to be reading the book Miss Mary Reporting. And this book was written by Sue Macy and illustrated by C.F. Payne. And the reason why we chose this book is actually because the illustrator, C.F. Payne, is from Ohio. He was born in Cincinnati. He attended Miami University, and then he taught for a number of years at the Columbus College of Art and Design, including when this book was written. So has some really great historical connections to Ohio. So I hope you enjoy the story, Miss Mary Reporting. Also, this copy, which is available in the Ohio Statehouse Museum shop, is signed by the illustrator, so that makes it pretty extra special. Mary Garber was a tiny bit of a girl, but that didn't stop her from playing football with the boys, tackle football, over rough and rocky ground. She called her team the Buena Vista Devils, or BVDs, and of course, she was the quarterback. It seemed that Mary was born loving sports. Her younger sister, Neely, thought that her father helped to feed Mary's interest. Not having a son, he'd take us to football games and other things, she said. As they watched, he taught his daughters the rules. He felt that if you were a spectator, you ought to know what you were spectating, Neely said. When she wasn't playing or watching sports, Mary was reading all she could about them. She followed boxing and baseball and loved the football team from the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. But Mary's mother wasn't as patient with her sports-loving daughter as her husband was. Neely said Mrs. Garber believed that a girl ought to be like a girl. Not that Mary's behavior surprised her mom. She was used to her middle daughter's independent streak. When Mary was 8 years old, her family moved from New Jersey to North Carolina. Mrs. Garber insisted that her three girls write letters to their grandparents back in the Garden State. Mary's older sister, Helen, did as she was told. So did Neely. But Mary thought letters were just boring, so she created a newspaper. In the Garber News, Mary reported all the news and drama from her neighborhood just outside of Winston-Salem. School was closed for the summer. Neely stepped on a tack. The BVDs won another game. The family poodle was run over by a car but escaped injury by crouching in a rut in the bumpy road. Writing the Garber News came naturally to Mary. Early on, she set her sights on a career as a newspaper reporter, but opportunities were scarce when she graduated from college. She finally took a job as a society reporter for the Twin City Sentinel, a paper in Winston-Salem. Society reporters wrote about parties and other social events. They had to describe the glamorous clothing people wore. That was not at all Mary's cup of tea. At one dance, Mary remembered, "I got the wrong dress on the wrong lady." After that, she brought along a friend who worked at a clothing store to help. Mary got her big break when the United States entered World War II. Many of the nation's young men joined the armed forces, leaving women to take over their jobs on the home front. After the Sentinel's last sports writer joined the Navy in 1944, the editor put Mary in charge. She kept the sports pages filled until the war was over. It wasn't easy, especially at the beginning. When Mary went to cover her first college football game, she found that there were no programs identifying the players. How could she describe the action if she didn't know who was making the plays? "I was just desperate," she later remembered. "I didn't know what I was going to do." Fortunately, a spectator saw her helpless expression and volunteered to sit with her and tell her who was who. "I couldn't have done it if he hadn't been for him," she said. "He really saved my skin." World War II came to an end, and Mary's boss moved her to the news desk. But a year later, she went back to sports for good, just in time to witness an important milestone in baseball. In 1947, the Brooklyn Dodgers added infielder Jackie Robinson to their roster. Back then, African-American athletes like Jackie played baseball in the segregated Negro leagues. When he joined the Dodgers, Jackie became the first black player in the major leagues since the 1880s. In August 1847, Mary traveled to Brooklyn, New York to watch the first-place Dodgers play 3 games against the Boston Braves. She was particularly impressed by Jackie's skill at bunting, tapping the ball lightly for a base hit. Last Wednesday, he laid down a perfect bunt along the third base line, she told her readers, and when Boston pitcher Johnny Sane threw wild to first, Robinson legged it all the way around to third. Jackie became a role model for Mary. She was inspired by his quiet dignity in the face of taunts and jeers from people who couldn't accept a black man in the major leagues. There's no getting around the fact that Robinson met these challenging days with maturity and courage, she would write in 1956. It takes guts to keep your mouth shut and walk away. It is against every normal reaction of human behavior, but Robinson did it. Mary had to endure her own share of slights and struggles. The trouble started in the press box, the area of the stadium or arena where reporters watch sports events. In the 1940s, women were banned from the press box at college football games. Mary was forced to sit with the coaches' wives until her editor complained. Even after she was allowed in, Mary had to wear the football writer's official press badge, which proclaimed, "Press box, women and children not admitted." Locker rooms posed yet another problem. After a game, male reporters headed into the team's locker rooms to interview players while they were changing into their street clothes. But Mary had to wait outside. By the time the players came out to talk to her, the male reporters had rushed back to write their stories. The players also wanted to go home, making it hard for Mary to get good quotes. A few skipped out on her altogether. Sometimes being a female sports reporter brought unusual requests. For example, a high school basketball coach once asked Mary to sew up a tear in a young man's uniform. Although she was far from a whiz with a needle and thread, Mary agreed to give it a try. "I nearly died during that game," she said, "because every time that kid went up for a rebound, I thought, oh gosh, those pants are going to rip and his pants are going to fall down and I'm going to be really embarrassed." But I'm proud to say that they held. Mary did her job with steady determination. Soon readers looked forward to her bylines. Coaches started to know her and respect her, and young athletes were eager to talk to her. When Mary started working for the Sentinel, many schools in the South were segregated. White children went to all white schools, and black children went to all black schools. The newspaper rarely covered games at Winston-Salem's all-black schools, but Mary changed that. "It seemed to me that black parents were as interested in what their kids were doing as white parents were," she said. Before long, black athletes were watching for her, hoping she would show up to write about their games. Mary showed up for more than 50 years. She wrote about baseball, football, basketball, tennis, track and field, and just about every other competitive contest, including marbles. She officially retired in 1986 at age 70, but after that, she kept coming to work every day and writing at least 3 articles a week. By the time Mary gave up this daily grind in 2002, people realized what an extraordinary career she'd had. She'd won awards and was voted into the Sports Writers Hall of Fame. These honors were part of Mary's legacy as a sports writer, but so were her encounters with the people she'd written about years before. Time after time, these adults showed Mary folded, yellowed newspaper clips with her byline that they'd been carrying in their wallets for decades. Mary understood why her reporting had a lasting impact. "I tried whenever I wrote about kids to be as positive as I could," she said. "If you can give a kid a pat on the back, or if you can tell him that he's done well, or you can make him believe in himself, you can make a difference in his life." Mary also made a difference in the lives of the women who followed in her footsteps. Ashley McGeechee-Fox, who covers the National Football League for ESPN.com, was an 8-year-old tennis player in Winston-Salem when Mary wrote an article about her. Years later, Mary was her role model as Ashley pursued her own career as a sports writer. Ashley said, "I remember thinking, if this petite lady in granny glasses can stand up to an angry coach, why can't I?" According to Mary, the greatest compliment she ever got came from a young boy. It happened in the 1950s when Mary was covering the soapbox derby in Winston-Salem. A friend of hers who was sitting in the stands overheard a conversation between 2 African-American boys about 8 and 10 years old. The older boy pointed to Mary and asked, "Do you see that lady down there on the field?" The second boy nodded. That's Miss Mary Garber, and she doesn't care who you are or where you're from or what you are. If you do something, she's going to write about you. And that's the end. So I hope you enjoyed the story of Miss Mary reporting. And this book, as I said, is available in the Ohio Statehouse Museum shop, which is currently open. And you can find information about the museum shop on our website, and you can make purchases there as well. Or of course, you can always look to your local library to see if they have this book available if you would like to see it in person for yourself and read it again at home. So thank you all again so much for joining us today, and we will see you soon for another Stories in the Stateroom.